Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us during our interview series. We've been able to talk to a lot of different industry professionals, and we're excited about the guests that we have today in the sports industry. If you would like to see our full guest lineup, you can check that out on our website, which is www.reachandteach.rocks. We're very excited about the guest that we have. She works for the Tampa Bay Rays. So Sydney, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Could you introduce yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you're from?
Yeah, so I'm Sydney. I'm from Tuscumbia, Alabama. I went to Deschler High School, grew up playing baseball. My dad played baseball in college and a little bit in the minor leagues. And so baseball was always in my family, and it's kind of always what I thought I wanted to do. I just wasn't exactly sure how. And so going through high school, I kind of thought I wanted to be an agent. And so I went to Ole Miss for college and worked with the baseball team there for a couple years. And then I worked in the Cape Cod Baseball League for a couple summers. And then after Ole Miss, I planned on going to law school. And so I went to law school for a little bit. And then I got offered the job that I have now. So I actually dropped out of law school and now I'm here. So that's kind of the short story, but I'm sure we'll dive into it a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. So you knew that maybe you always wanted a career in sports. Was law school part of that, or did you have your eye on other careers in sports? But could you tell us a little bit more about that aspect of it, I guess?
Yeah. So I always knew I wanted to work in baseball. Like I said, I just wasn't for sure how I was going to get in because it's just such a competitive field. So I kind of thought, you don't have to have a law degree to be an agent or to work in baseball, but it certainly doesn't help. It certainly doesn't hurt. So I kind of thought, I'll go to law school, learn those skills, kind of market myself more to teams or agencies or MLBPA or the commissioner's office, either one. And so that was kind of the thought process. But luckily, this job kind of landed in my lap a little bit. So I realized that, this opportunity wasn't going to always be there, but I could always go back and go to law school. So that was kind of my thought process there.
Yeah, so that's so exciting to think about, having a career in sports. So many times students think that to work in sports, you've got to be the star athlete or you've got to be the one on the field. But I'm sure there's so many different responsibilities behind the scenes that we don't necessarily know about if we're just watching a game on TV. So could you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day activities look like working in amateur scouting? What does that mean, number one? And what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so it's a little different based on, kind of just the week or the month. So starting in about January, we'll usually have like our big January amateur scouting meetings. And so all of our scouts will come in and we'll kind of talk about the priority prospects and kind of lay out for this spring, like who we really want to see, like, or who the big executives or who the main guys in our amateur scouting department should kind of prioritize. And so we do that, and then we go through the spring scouting and, writing reports and looking at data and stuff like that. And then a big bulk of my job in the spring is doing and going through draft medicals. And so any draft eligible player they have to submit a couple questionnaires. And so one of those is a medical questionnaire. And so they also have to submit notes kind of explaining, what happened in that injury, how they recovered, their rehab process, that kind of stuff. And so if anything is kind of questionable, we'll flag it and kind of send it to our major league medical staff. And so they'll kind of look through those and just kind of tell us if something's super concerning, we should kind of look out for it and stuff like that. And so then that kind of all builds up to the draft, which next year will be in July. Normally it's in June, but COVID kind of messed everything up a little bit. But next year it's in July, so we'll just scout and do all of that stuff leading up to July. And then my side or my duties as far as the draft is kind of anything on the admin side. So just coordinating with MLB to make sure that we have all the information that we need, that we're just ready for the draft, and that logistically our department is where it needs to be. Whether that's just making sure any guys that we've been scouting are draft eligible, they have a draft ID, that kind of stuff. And then post-draft, after we draft the guys, we sign them. And so we'll bring them in and they'll go through kind of like a post-draft physical just to make sure there's nothing surprising as far as their medical status. And so they'll go through that, and then I generate the contract and facilitate the contract signing and all of that stuff. And then we send them normally we would send them to a minor league team. This past year, they just kind of got sent home and they had to do their own thing because we didn't have a minor league season. And then in the summer, there's a lot of different summer events for, there's either like collegiate summer league teams or big showcases for high school players. And so we kind of draft and then immediately go into the next draft season. So actually next year there will be a few 2022 draft showcases or events before the 2021 draft even happens. So we've never really had to do that before. So that'll be interesting seeing how that works out. And then in the fall, there's fall season. And then while this is going on, the big league season is usually happening. So it's fun to watch those games too. But so during the fall, we have college fall season. There's high school showcases, and it's kind of just getting ready for the spring. So that's kind of the cycle of the amateur season.
Yeah, that sounds so exciting because I've never really understood the process of how that works. And it sounds like you are not only looking for players that are playing in college, but do you draft or do you look at players that are still in high school? Is that a process that you go through on a yearly basis?
Yeah, so there's a few ways that you can be draft eligible. So the main ones are, you're either graduating, you're a senior in high school, or you're a junior in college, or you'll be 21 45 days after the last day of the draft, or you're in junior college. There's some different nuances there, but so actually our first round pick this year was Nick Bitsko. We drafted him out of high school, and he actually reclassified. So we saw him last summer at East Coast Pro, and at the time he was a 2021 draft eligible because he was going into his junior year, and then he reclassified. So he's actually pretty young. So he reclassified as a senior. So our first round draft pick this year was out of high school. So there's a few ways that you can be draft eligible. Those are the main ones, or those are probably all of them. But
yeah. So I'm sure working in sports, I always love to see women working in sports. It's something that you don't always see all the time. But have you encountered any challenges along your journey, whether it be just because you're a woman or just challenges in general? But what are some of those obstacles that you faced, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. Luckily, I haven't really faced any type of, as far as I know, any type of prejudices as far as being a female. I'm sure there's probably someone behind closed doors that I encountered on the way that they just didn't act that way, which that's very lucky of me, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I faced the same kind of obstacles that anyone trying to work in baseball would face. I mean, it's the market, it's so hard to get in. There's so many people trying to do this. And there's so many different areas that you could go in. And so, like I said, luckily someone had my resume and this job was open. And so they sent it to the Rays, and it kind of just fell in my lap. But yeah, I mean, there's endless amounts of obstacles, just whether it's, I wasn't super qualified as far as the data side. And so we're a super data analytics driven team, and that's kind of how baseball is in general now. And so I currently don't have before I had this job, I didn't have like a ton of hard skills there. And so just learning it on the job has been super, super helpful. And I'm actually going to grad school in the spring to kind of help me be better there. But yeah, just whether it's obstacles like that or obstacles is just, there's so many people trying to get in, and you just have to be better than anyone else. Cause I do our intern, I kind of facilitate our intern hiring process, and we'll have anywhere from 300 to 500 people apply for that one internship. And so there's only a small amount of spots with teams, and it's super hard to get in. So those are kind of the obstacles that you'll just normally face.
Yeah. So I'm sure since you've graduated high school and you've been in this industry, you've probably discovered some different careers that you might not have known existed while you were still in high school. Could you tell us a little bit about some of those careers that are behind the scenes that maybe students don't know are available to them?
Yeah, I mean, since graduating high school, I didn't know a ton about on the team side. Just like I said, I wanted to work at an agency. And so to almost probably to my fault, I didn't like super research front offices and teams in that manner. So I really didn't even know a job like mine really existed. I don't know in high school what I thought happened on the draft, like on the amateur side. I don't know if I just thought there was a director and then all of the area scouts. I didn't really realize there were so many people working in the front office, just specifically on the amateur side. So we have, as far as our department, we have our director and then we have our assistant director, our coordinator, me, and then we have an intern. And then we have I think we have 17 area scouts, and then we have 4 regional supervisors, and then a national cross checker, and then we have just a pitching cross checker. So he just kind of focuses on pitchers during the spring. And then we have 2 or 3 different like special assignment scouts. So I just didn't even realize how big, and I know not every team has as big as a department as we do, but I just didn't really realize probably in high school going in like what that looked like. I didn't know that there was someone specifically like my role that just kind of focuses on kind of coordinating with MLB. I don't know if I just thought the director did that. But yeah, and then as far as other departments, I mean, we have player development, baseball development, sports science, pro scouting, just major league ops, minor league ops, international scouting. Like we just have, there's so many different departments, and I kind of was just always focused on kind of trying to find, as far as being an agent, like I knew the amateur route that's kind of where you have to start. I mean, you have to find these kids in high school and before someone else does. But I just didn't really realize what all went into an amateur scouting department.
Yeah, that's some great insight. And I think it'll really open up the eyes of students that are interested in a career in maybe this industry. So could you maybe give some advice of something that students could do right now while they're still in high school that might help them be successful if they want to get into the sports industry?
Yeah, my number one piece of advice really is, I mean, we've seen it happen over the past decade or two. Everything's really becoming data driven, and analytics is huge in every, especially in baseball, it's huge in every department. And I know hockey analytics is starting to be pretty big now, and I think football analytics is starting to grow. So that's, there's so much data out there, and people need to be able to read it and analyze it and sift through it. So if there are any type of courses, or really, I mean, if you're undecided what you want your major to be in college, I would do some type of computer science, statistics, data science, anything like that that's kind of data driven, that'll kind of help you be able to sift through all of that big data. That's kind of my one regret, which is kind of why I'm going back to going to grad school in the spring. I wish I would have done more of that in undergrad. I took a couple courses that kind of gave me the basis of it, but at the time, like I said, I wanted to work in an agency, so I didn't really think I needed that as much as I thought the law degree would help me. So yeah, anything that can kind of help train your brain to think in that mindset. And then I also I took a few semesters of Spanish, but I wish I would have kind of dove deeper into that. That's just such an important skill to have, and just be able to communicate with those Latin players. I think that's such an important skill to have. I kind of wish that I would have focused more on that, go either in high school and college. And yeah, so those are kind of my 2 pieces of advice as far as.
I love that. I mean, definitely, I think learning how to analyze anything, statistics or life in general, I mean, that's going to help students be successful, not only in this career, but really any career path that they choose, is just having to have having those analytical thoughts and being able to analyze data, like you mentioned. So great advice. And I know you already kind of touched on this. My next question for you was, what was something that you wish you would have learned at an earlier age? Is there anything that you want to add in regards to maybe communication or teamwork or networking? Is there something that you wish you would have learned maybe before you got into the industry of what could have really helped you?
Yeah, like I said, those are two of my kind of main, I guess, regrets. But one thing for sure, and my mom, I think she's probably on this watching, but my friends kind of joke and laugh that we call her like the queen of networking. That's a huge thing. I mean, you can never start networking too early. Like I said, this job kind of fell in my lap just because I knew someone at the commissioner's office who sent my resume. So my mom actually helped me connect with two agents at CAA in Nashville whenever I think I was a sophomore in college, maybe. And that was kind of, I don't know if I wouldn't have met those two guys, I don't know if I would be at this job today, just because they kind of gave me so much guidance. They told me a lot of books to read. They told me, like, they knew people at Ole Miss that they helped me kind of get my internship there with the baseball team. Yeah, you can just never meet people too early. And so one piece of advice or one kind of quote that I don't remember exactly where I was. I think I might have been at my cousin's graduation in Alabama, but they said, it's not about who you know, but who knows you. So you can know all these people in the industry, but if those people don't have a good idea of you, and they don't have, if they don't know your character, and they don't know, if they don't have a positive mindset of you, that's not going to help you a whole lot. So just be kind of intentional in developing those relationships, and that'll go a long way.
Absolutely. I love what you said, that you can never start building your network too early. Reaching out to strangers or new people can sometimes be scary, but you never know where that opportunity is going to lead you. So highly encourage doing that as well too. So the last question that we have for you, then we're going to open it up to questions from students. So if you guys have questions, drop them into the chat, to the comment section. We'll make sure and get those answered before the interview ends today. So my last question for you is, what is some actionable advice that students can do right now? I know you mentioned really pay attention in statistics, but as far as meeting people, as far as really gaining those skills, what is something that they could do right now while they're still in high school to really maybe propel them to jumpstart their career?
Yeah, I think one, and this kind of goes back to networking, but just kind of find someone. And I know in high school, in high school, I thought I was going to be an agent. So you might not for sure know exactly what you want to do, but try to find someone in the industry that you want to kind of model either your career or your character. Just try to find someone who can be kind of, quote, a mentor, even if you don't exactly know them or able to kind of reach out to them. But just find someone, research them, kind of figure out their background, how they got to where they are, and then kind of what they stand for and kind of the culture that they're building. I know that's one thing, that's a huge thing with the Rays, is our culture, and it's an incredible place to work. But yeah, just kind of, and if you are able to reach out to that person, it might be, the person that you kind of want to model might be the GM of a team, and that's kind of hard to get connected to them, but it might be someone in a lower level position that, you can kind of start there and like see how they got there and kind of connect with them. I would recommend, reaching out to those people, even just emailing them. The least they could do is just not respond, and then you're kind of in the same position you started in, but you'll never know. I people in these positions, they were in high school at one point. They know how it feels to be in that position. So there's a lot of people that will just cold email me and just ask for advice, or just send the resume along and say, hey, how do you think my resume looks? Do you think that there's any skill that I should add here to market myself more to teams, that kind of stuff. So I would just try to find someone in a position that you think you would like to be in the future, and just kind of model either your career path or, just how you treat people and the culture that you're trying to build there.
I love that advice. I mean, like you said, the worst that could happen is they don't respond or they say no, and you're right back where you started. So why not give it a try and hopefully get that advantage that you wouldn't have had otherwise had you not asked. I love that. So we do have a few questions from students. The first question that we have for you is, do you get to travel all over the country or do you travel to only specific areas?
So thankfully with my role, I'm set in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is where the Rays are. So I work in the office. Normally with COVID, we're working from home, but I don't have a specific area that I'm kind of tied to. There's so much, luckily in Florida, there's so much amateur baseball that we can kind of I can drive 5 minutes somewhere and find a game. But I am able to go to different places. I've been, a lot of the showcases are not in Florida. And so East Coast Pro normally is in Birmingham, Alabama this year. It was in Birmingham again, but it was limited to how many people could go. So I unfortunately didn't get to go there. But a couple of weeks ago, the Perfect Game Tournament, which is normally in Jupiter, this year was in Fort Myers, which is a couple hours from here. So I went to that a couple weeks ago. I've been to Phoenix, just really all over the place. Anywhere that, our director or coordinator kind of says, hey, we need someone to see this game. And if I'm able to go and they choose me to go, that's kind of how that goes. But yeah, so we had meetings I think last November. We had our West Coast meetings out in LA. And so I was able to go to USC and kind of watch a fall game there. So really, I'm luckily not kind of restricted to one area, but I can kind of go wherever they send me.
That's exciting. I mean, honestly, it sounds like you have a really incredible, exciting job, especially this year. You guys were in the World Series. Could you tell us a little bit about what that feeling was like and kind of the steps that you went through, like, in that process?
Yeah, it was awesome. I know it's probably a different feeling during a regular season, but I don't think it diminishes, 2020 doesn't diminish anything that we did. Honestly, it was harder to get to the World Series this year just because there were more teams in the playoffs. But we weren't able to go. I was able to go to the first, I think, 10 or 12 home games that we had because I worked TrackMan there. And so I was fortunate enough that I was able to actually see some regular season games. The rest of the office, we couldn't have fans, and so it was limited to the number of people that could be there. So I was fortunate enough to see some live baseball there. And then as the season went on, different people worked different things. But then we were actually able to go to the 2 wildcard games where we played the Blue Jays. So that was kind of the first time that we got to see everyone since, March, whenever COVID shut us all down. So that was exciting, just being able to share. We swept the Blue Jays. So that was exciting being able to share those moments with, our teammates. And then they flew out to San Diego after that. And we played the Yankees, and then we played the Astros. And so that was huge, very big, or very good teams that we played. It was, I wouldn't say we were necessarily the underdog just because we had the best team in the American League at the time, and we had the best team in the American League, but it was pretty nerve-wracking just because those teams are so hot and their lineup is so scary. So I hung on to every single pitch at every game. But we weren't able to go to those games because they were in San Diego, and they weren't open to fans unless you were in the bubble. And so we watched that with being COVID friendly. I would kind of watch that with 2 or 3 people that live in my apartment that work for the Rays too. And so it was fun to experience that with them. But then once we won the ALCS, we actually got to go to Arlington where we played at Globe Life Field where the Rangers play. And so I went to games 1, 2, and then games 5, 6. And so I missed 3 and 4, which 4 was the really exciting game. I don't know if anyone watched it, but we were down a run in the bottom of the 9th with 2 outs, and Brett Phillips hit a single that scored Kevin Kiermaier, and then Randy Rosarino, there were 2 errors in the play, and it was just like crazy what happened there. But I unfortunately was not at that game, but I was at games 5 and 6. But, even though we lost, we hadn't made it to the World Series since 2008. And so just even though we lost, it was just so exciting to be there with my teammates and just experience that with them.
Yeah, I can imagine what a thrill that would be. So quick question. Well, first of all, how long have you been with the Rays? You may have mentioned this earlier, but
I started October 2018, so I actually just had my 2-year work anniversary.
Okay. So how long does the process take from, recruiting those young amateur players to them making it to the Tampa Bay Rays on the field? Like what's the length of that process? I'm sure it's different for everyone, but could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it is different for every player, whether they're in high school or college or junior college. So, I mean, normally you would think the high school players would take a little bit longer to get there, just because there's a different kind of path of development. And it also kind of depends on their current skill set and not necessarily how high they were drafted. But there is some correlation there. The higher drafted guys usually turn out being a little bit better. There are some outliers, in the 39th round. Those people do make it too. But it's hard to say specifically. I mean, it could take anywhere from, less than 2 years to 6 or 7. Like it just kind of depends on the development path and the team that they're at, if there's a spot for them, that kind of stuff.
So with you being at the Rays for 2 years, have you been able to see someone that you saw early on and, you recruited them early on to now they're playing on the field? Have you been able to experience that yet, or is that something that's upcoming?
Yeah, not yet. So my first draft was 2019. So none of those guys have made it to our big league team yet. But in 2018, we drafted Shane McClanahan. So it was right before I got here. And he made his major league debut in the postseason this past season. So he's kind of the closest one. I did see him as an amateur a little bit, just not with the Rays. And then there are a few other players like Nico Horner with the Cubs. I saw him when I worked in the Cape, and then he made his debut last year. And then Kyle Wright, I saw him when I was at Ole Miss. He pitched for Vanderbilt, and he made his debut last year. So, there's been players over the past couple seasons that I've seen debut, just not specifically any guys that we drafted with the Rays.
Yeah. I can imagine that would be an exciting process as well too.
Yeah.
So the last question that we have for you is, how is scouting for baseball different from maybe football or basketball?
It's a good question. I don't know if I'm really qualified to answer it because I'm not super into basketball or football. I don't know. I don't really want to. I can say what I think. It could probably be completely wrong, but as far as the process, those guys that are drafted in the NFL draft, they usually kind of go straight to the team. So I don't know how scouting specifically is different, but definitely the player development side of it's probably a little different, just because they're in the minor leagues for a lot longer than. I don't even know if there's I don't think there's an NFL minor leagues. It's just the practice squad. I don't know. As far as NBA, correct me if I'm wrong here, if you know, but I'm pretty sure they can. They're eligible for the draft after their first year in college, and so that's different too. If you are draft eligible out of high school, which you're draft eligible out of high school, but you decide not to sign or you're not drafted and you go to a 4-year college, you have to wait until you're either a junior or you're 21, 45 days after the draft. So as far as the timeline's a little different. And so you're definitely, as a scout, you're looking at those freshmen and sophomores and just kind of making either just mental notes or just kind of, we call them pocket follows. But you're kind of keeping track of those, but you're really, each draft season, you're focusing on the players that are draft eligible. So those are going to be the juniors, or if you're at a 4-year school. So as far as those freshmen that would usually be draft eligible for NBA, you're not super honed in focusing on those.
Yeah. So we actually have one more question. This is a really good one that came in. So does social media play a part in drafting players?
Yeah, it's huge. I wouldn't say it's a huge aspect as far as it's not as far as evaluating their ability, but MLB does the top 300. So the teams will submit like a top 300 list of prospects that they think are the top 300 prospects, and then MLB will kind of sift through those and kind of determine as a unit kind of who they think the top 300 overall draft eligible players are. And then they have, I don't know if they have some kind of third party system that does it, or if they have someone hired at MLB that does it, but they'll go through all the social medias of those 300 kids, and they'll kind of flag anything that they think is kind of derogatory or bigotry, anything like that, and they'll send us a list with links of posts. And so we get those, and then actually one of our intern, one of his duties during the spring is the people who aren't in the top 300 and but we still value pretty highly. He'll go through, or she, they'll go through and see if there's anything that they should flag there. There have been, I mean, there are a few things where it's like, this is a top first round, second round guy, and he tweeted this thing 3 or 4 years ago. Let's try to get to the bottom of it. And so there have been a couple instances where our scouts have probably had to go into, when you could go into houses and talk to the kids before COVID, but just kind of bring up that and kind of get the story and as to why they did that. But yeah, no, social media, it is huge. And even flipping that, like it's big on the hiring process as well, not even necessarily players. Like, I will go, and if I see someone, once we get down to our few finalists for our interns, I'll go through and try to find their social media just to make sure that there's nothing that would surprise us if they came in, and had this tweet from a couple years ago that's either racist or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, that is great insight for students, because they hear all the time that, be careful what you put on social media, but to hear it truly from someone who works in the industry, that is part of the process, that your social media is looked at, even if it is from a couple of years ago. Well, Sydney, we have loved having you today. I feel like you've shared so much good information with our students. Is there any last details you want to add or anything before we go today?
I don't think so. Just if anybody else has any questions, I mean, you have my email. Just feel free to reach out. More than happy to help.
Absolutely. And I'll follow up with you and get maybe some book recommendations or things that you might help students. And we'll drop those into the comment sections for students. So, well, you guys have a wonderful day. Don't forget, we will have 2 more interviews next week. So check out our website so you can see who our guests are. And y'all have a wonderful Thursday.